In a bar once, this guy came up to me and said, "Oh, you f***ing Jew."
I was posting about my fear of anti-Semitism skyrocketing, and I was deleted just for that, for just being afraid, knowing that Israel and the media would cause a spike in anti-Semitism.
I woke up the next morning to a deluge of anti-Semitic hate mail and death threats. And I saw a message, and it said, "Get out of my country, you get back to Israel where you belong. That or the ovens, take your pick."
Good evening. I am David Saginaw, and it is my honor to be the president of the Jewish Federation of Greater Metro West New Jersey. I want to welcome the more than 300 people who have joined tonight's webinar from across our community. We know why you're here. Like you, we are deeply disturbed by what feels like an epidemic of hate against Jews in our country, coming from multiple sources, including in-person and online. From hate-filled rants by national entertainers, Holocaust deniers, and white supremacists, to assaults against Jews on New York City streets and elsewhere, the Jewish community is feeling vulnerable and at risk. Last month's FBI alert sounding the alarm bells on a credible threat against New Jersey synagogues brought things right to our own backyard. Not to mention the almost weekly appearance of swastikas in our local parks and high schools. Anti-Semitism is not on the decline. What we are here to do tonight is to come together as a community and to shine a light on Federation's work to confront anti-Semitism, to safeguard our synagogues and Jewish institutions, and secure our communities as places where we can live proud Jewish lives. We are grateful to our elected leaders at the federal, state, and local levels who have stood shoulder to shoulder with us. You will now hear from 4 of our Jewish Federation professionals, each involved in the different spheres of work, from lobbying to security trainings to education and advocacy, who will talk about what they do to help safeguard and elevate our community. Jordana Horn-Gordon, a member of our JCRC steering committee, will introduce the team and follow up with questions after their 5-minute presentations. Audience members will also have a chance to ask questions through the Q&A feature, and we'll try to get to as many of those as possible. Finally, to our entire community, we are strong, resilient, and well protected. We will get through this together. And for anyone needing assistance or reassurance, we have people here who can speak to you. Just reach out. It is now my pleasure to introduce Jordana Horn-Gordon. Jordana.
Thank you, David, and hello, everyone. It is my pleasure to introduce the 4 members of Jewish Federation's professional team directly responsible for confronting anti-Semitism and safeguarding our community. Linda Scherzer is the director of our Jewish Community Relations Council, the Government Affairs, Israel Engagement, and Community Relations Building Wing of Jewish Federation. Rebecca Adelson is director of Hillel of Greater Metro West, helping to support Jewish life on 6 campuses throughout our area. Elise Shane Brown leads Federation's Holocaust Education Department. Among many other things, Elise works with survivors to share their stories with the community. And finally, Bob Wilson, our Chief Security Officer, helps secure and safeguard our synagogues and Jewish institutions. Bob is going to start us off with the first of 4 presentations.
Thanks, Jordana, for moderating this evening. David, thank you for your support. Zev Sherrill, your leadership as the chair of the JCRC has helped convene the group to shine a Federation's light on this most important and pressing issue. Thank you so much for joining us. Your participation tonight shows your commitment, and it's your commitment to action that helps to support our efforts to ensure that we remain aware and safe. Reporting acts of anti-Semitism is of the utmost importance. We cannot track and deploy resources if we do not know what is happening in our greater Metro West community. In 2021, the FBI reported that hate crimes representing anti-Jewish bias accounted for 32% of all reported incidents, more than those targeting any other religious group. These statistics are a striking reminder that the Jewish community remains a top target for hate crimes amidst the troubling targeting of the greater faith-based community. Our community security initiative here in GMW works in partnership with the other Jewish federations within New Jersey, our New York City partners, and the Secure Community Network to monitor information, intelligence, and threats and incidents impacting our GMW community continuously, and we coordinate with law enforcement and our other partners as necessary. So how do we become aware of anti-Semitic incidents in GMW? We're made aware of incidents from our community members, law enforcement, media reports, and security partners. The largest source of our anti-Semitic incident reports is from our community. We cannot do this without you. So how does someone report an incident to the Federation? It's really rather simple. You could either email myself, you could call me, or you can report it on our Federation's Security Incident Reporting Portal. My contact information and the information relative to the portal will be provided to all participants this evening. Please do not assume that we know about an incident. I'd much rather receive multiple reports of an incident and not be aware of something that may be impacting our community. And please remember that we are not a law enforcement agency. So if there's a risk of harm, please call 911 first to initiate the appropriate law enforcement response. Afterwards, report it to us. So what do we do with the information received at GMW? Well, we have an internal anti-Semitic incident review and assessment procedure that ensures that we track the incidents and deploy resources internally and externally as necessary and appropriate. We assess the threat posed by the incident. We determine if an immediate intervention is required and notify the community if necessary. We engage in research of social media history of the individual or individuals involved. We report the matter to law enforcement and provide educational resources where appropriate. Our process is comprehensive and ensures that no incident goes unaddressed. Remember, only with accurate reporting will we have a thorough understanding of the problem that we are trying to address. One of the ways that we address is through training. When our actions, can you go back to the slides, please? When the actions go beyond anti-Semitic remarks and evolve into violence, we need to train. We train not only to respond to a violent threat, we train to empower our community so that we can have a strong, prepared, and educated community that is a safe community. Training is necessary for all. Make sure that your synagogue, early childhood center, or the GMW partner agency that you work with avails themselves of security training, either through their local police department, their security contract, or directly from the Federation's Community Security Initiative. Just in the last 6 months alone, we have conducted 44 training sessions with over 1,000 participants at 23 synagogues, 13 partner agencies, and 8 early childhood centers. We train to help you have a comprehensive security plan that consists of people, procedures, and equipment. We make sure that your people are trained, we provide you with guidance on your procedures, and we ensure you get the appropriate equipment necessary if need be through grants assistance. We can train an active threat response, situational awareness, usher greeter, and emergency procedure development, and aid in conducting drills. Training can be coordinated by your synagogue, early childhood center, or partner agency directly through myself. And of course, the training is free. Now I'll turn the screen over to Elise Shane Brown, who leads our Federation's Holocaust Education Department. Elise.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much, Bob. And thank you everyone for being here today and for joining us on this very important panel. So it's my job at Federation to ensure that Holocaust education is taught broadly everywhere and anywhere in in and around Greater Metro West, which means in public schools, private schools, parochial schools, community centers, churches, synagogues, mosques, anywhere that needs education, wants education, we go there. We tend to do this in two different ways. One is the proactive way, which I want to talk about first, where we work directly with administrators, school districts, groups, that townships, sometimes it's parents that see a lack of education in their schools, to ensure that the curriculum standards are being met. New Jersey was the first state to mandate Holocaust education back in the early 1990s. And even before that, we were the first state that actually had a commission on Holocaust education. It still exists. We actually met today. I sit on that commission as well. So we work in partnership with them and with the entire area to make sure that that mandate is being filled. We enhance that curriculum with books, lesson plans, speakers, trips to museums, both in New York City and in DC, and as well as teacher trainings, to make sure that each school is getting the support they need so that every student is getting a broad and strong Holocaust education background. The next thing we do is a reactive education. And of course, we never want to be doing a reactive education, but at times it does happen, as we know, as we've seen recently in the past months. And the way to really do that is when we are told something. So like Bob had just mentioned, we implore reporting. We work hand in hand when it is reported and it needs education. The first link is that Bob sends that to me. I reach out to the schools. Sometimes that's through parents. Sometimes it's through another teacher. Sometimes it's through law enforcement, and it comes to us, and we offer education based on the incident and what happened. So an example of that is that a few weeks ago, we had a problem with hateful symbols in a school district. It wasn't words, it was symbols. And a lot of what the students were saying was that they didn't really understand any of the meanings behind these hateful symbols. So we went in and we did a training on what symbols mean, how to educate on symbols, specifically the swastika, but all hateful symbols overall, and where we go with that. So that was a reactive example. We also do it on an individual basis when it comes sometimes even to specific students that have gotten themselves into trouble for a certain reason, where we've worked with the school district to enforce some kind of lesson so that they're not just punished for what they did, because really what we want them to know is understand why they did something that was so wrong and so hateful. We know that the speech and hateful symbols leads to more, so we want to stress that to the students. And so in that, we tend to move towards some type of survivor story where we will either meet a survivor if possible, or the child or grandchild of a survivor, or we will have the student research and find out about a survivor's life or something that happened to somebody in the Holocaust, and then write a letter to that person explaining how they felt when hearing their story. So we do this across the entire area, and we will continue to do that. If there's anything you see in your districts, there are hundreds of schools here in Greater Metro West. So if there are any things that you see in your districts or in your schools, we want to know about them, and we want to be there to help with their education. I'm going to turn the program over now to Rebecca Adelson.
Thanks, Elise. And thank you to Jewish Federation of Greater Metro West for hosting this, and thank you for everyone who's on the call. My role here is that I am the Hillel Director of Greater Metro West, and we serve 6 campuses in central North New Jersey area. Those campuses are Montclair State University, NJIT, Rutgers Newark, Seton Hall, Fairleigh Dickinson in Florham Park, and Kane University. We serve approximately 900 students every year, a quarter of which are Jewish. And next slide, please. So anti-Semitism exists on our campuses in a lot of different ways, but the most of our problems come from anti-Israel groups, such as Students for Justice in Palestine and BDS resolutions that go up in Senate. BDS is boycott, divest, and sanctions. Rather than traditional forms of anti-Semitism that you see, like swastikas being drawn, which is in some ways a great thing and in some ways really difficult to manage. So Rutgers Newark is one of our campuses that faces a lot of trouble, and they have only recently formed a recognized Hillel because of extreme pushback from Students for Justice in Palestine. They also have law department and organizations that are bringing in anti-Semitic speakers onto campus. They cater to anti-Israel groups. I could go on about that, but I'll save it for later. And so what we've been doing is working with administration there to try to tackle some of those issues. About 6 years ago, a resolution went up in the Montclair State Student Senate, a boycott, divest, and sanctions resolution. And luckily, our students were able to step up to the plate and fight that, and it failed. And now they have a newly recognized SJP on campus. Seton Hall has also been getting attention from Palestinian students and anti-Israel students after they had a very public and really wonderfully attended Yom HaAtzmaut celebration last year. So we're starting to see a little bit of pickup there. And not listed here, actually, we also have some, I guess, activity starting at NJIT, because NJIT now has a relationship with Bar Ilan University in Israel. And there are students who are fighting back against that. And our students there are a little afraid of what that means for them. Next slide, please. So how are we supporting students on campus? One thing that we just did recently, we had the Zachor legal team come in and they led a Know Your Rights seminar for our students, where they basically explained to them what they can do legally if anything were to happen on campus in terms of anti-Israel activity or anti-Zionist activity, anti-Semitism. It was a really great program. We're also hosting a weekend in March, a conference called Israel Unplugged, which will be a chance for approximately 75 students to come together and learn all about Israel and how they can combat anti-Semitism on campus themselves. And so we have 13 campuses participating, more than 5 Israel partners now, different keynote speakers. It's going to be a really incredible event. Birthright is also incredibly important to us in terms of our students feeling empowered on campus. We send students every season, so winter and summer. And although Birthright funding has recently been cut back, we are not really being affected by that. So that's really great news. We also have a great partnership with Federation's JCRC and the Holocaust Council, and we're able to bring people like Mark Schonwetter, who's a survivor, to Rutgers Newark, which was an amazing event, and we're very lucky to have them there. So I am now going to turn the floor over to Linda Scherzer.
Thank you, Rebecca, and good evening, everyone. I'd like to start by pointing out what I think is a fundamental truth about what you just heard from my 3 colleagues and what you're about to hear from me. And that is that this Jewish Federation, your Jewish Federation, and the professional team and lay leaders who work with us hand in hand are people who work locally. We engage in grassroots advocacy in the 5 counties that we serve. We support and we represent 150,000 Jews across these 5 counties in our catchment area. And we leverage the strong relationships and connections that we make every day to help safeguard and secure our community. So first, a few words about the JCRC. I mean, who are we? So as the Government Affairs and Public Policy wing of the Federation, our bread and butter work involves legislative advocacy. And in this climate of rising anti-Semitism, we work on a state, local, and federal level to secure tens of millions of dollars every year in nonprofit security grant funding, which is the money that's used to strengthen our synagogues, to secure our synagogues and Jewish institutions across our 5 counties. We are also the Israel advocacy wing of the Jewish Federation, and through that wing, we have created what is considered one of the premier early engagement programs for high school students to prepare our teens for what is often a toxic and vitriolic climate on college campus in terms of anti-Israel and anti-Semitic activities. We respond, we're the first responders to what goes on in the world and what goes on locally. So these days, we are very, very engaged in confronting anti-Semitism. And as the outward facing department of the Federation, we are the community relations building wing, engaging with communities outside of our own. Next slide, please. So relationship building, ladies and gentlemen, is absolutely baked into everything that we do. In fact, it is so important that it's virtually in the name of this department. You can see the list of institutions and people that we interact with on a federal and state level and across our communities. We do that in order to, I like to say that while Bob Wilson works to secure and strengthen the doors to our synagogues, the JCRC works to strengthen the fabric of our civil society. And that is really important as we get to the next slide, because the strength of those relationships is what helps us in doing our work. So when we have to respond reactively, here are some recent examples of what we do. When there are anti-Israel or vitriolic anti-Semitic posts, like the ones that we saw on social media that were posted by Kanye West, we are reaching out to our elected officials to make sure that they are issuing their own statements on social media to immediately denounce and repudiate these posts. When there are eggs that are thrown at a Jewish fraternity at our state university, Rutgers, on Holocaust Remembrance Day, or more recently during at Rosh Hashanah, we and our 4 other partner federations across the state are calling and knocking on the door of President Holloway, the president of Rutgers University, to make sure that he, to demand that he come down hard in denouncing this kind of activity. And when we learn, as Rebecca told you, about incidents at Rutgers Newark, when students are telling us that they are afraid to show their Jewish stars or they're putting baseball caps over their kippot, we are engaging with the chancellor and her chief of staff to say that this is simply unacceptable. When there are incidents of swastikas in public high schools, we're engaging with the head of school. I'm putting them in touch with Elise Shane Brown, who's sometimes bringing Holocaust survivors to come and talk about what does this symbol of hate actually mean. Or we're bringing in our partners at the ADL to bring in their No Place for Hate program into these schools. When candidates for public office are making these absurd and appalling statements that are conflating mask mandates during the pandemic that are designed to keep school children safe, when those are being compared to what the Nazis did during the Second World War, we immediately, engage with these people. We demand that they retract, that they apologize, that they clarify their statements. And when that doesn't happen, as a recent incident back in 2021 in Chatham, when that doesn't happen and the candidate refuses to make a retraction, we issued a statement on the day that he was sworn in to say that this is simply unacceptable. And very recently, when the Newark public school system decides to introduce a book into its 6th grade curriculum, into the language arts class, that is a coming of age story of a young Palestinian boy, a very compelling story that talks about his life under Israeli occupation, watching his father being humiliated, a story that we know is going to create, well, that certainly defines Israel as the villain in this story, and we know is going to create bad feelings about Israel and potentially about Jews. This story was being taught in 200 classrooms. Close to 3,000 students are learning about this. We reach out to the assistant superintendent to have honest, respectful conversations about why we believe that this book is inappropriate, that there should be a book certainly at least to balance that story coming from the Israeli side, or what we really want to happen, that book be replaced. Now, I'm not going to tell you that in every situation we come out with a satisfying conclusion. But what we do know is that silence today is simply not an option. Next slide, please. So what is far more gratifying than reacting to these incidents of anti-Semitism that are really appearing, I would say, at least once a week, is the way that we work proactively to build relationships, to create that healthy society that I talked about earlier. I want to talk specifically about what I think is one of our most important initiatives this year, the creation of a Community Leaders Against Hate and Anti-Semitism Committee that started in January, and that has grown to include Muslim leaders, Hindu leaders, Christian leaders, of course, Jewish lay leaders from the JCRC. We have, and I'm about to show you a photo of what I thought was one of our most, magical events. And in fact, I'm going to ask for the next slide. This is a picture from our Interfaith Rosh Hashanah. It is, I would say, one of the most beautiful pictures produced this year. It shows our chair of Interfaith Outreach, Rabbi Rob Tobin, blowing a shofar at this event. And you see two Hindu leaders putting their hands together like this, and a Muslim leader whose reflection is in the glass. People from different faiths responding to the sound of the shofar, a coming together of community, a strengthening of relationships within our community, ones that we are continuing to build upon. Next slide, please. This is the annual event that we did prior to the pandemic. We did as recently as the spring of this year, and we'll be doing again next year. This is a leadership mission to Washington every year. We bring leaders from our community to Washington to lobby for 3 critical items on our agenda. And what's important about this is that we're showing our elected leaders that we are not just making calls and sending emails, but that this matters enough to us that we are getting on a train. We are going to Washington. And if you look at the faces in these pictures, these are not just professional Federation people who are being paid to do this. These are our beloved lay leaders who are coming with us, and that speaks volumes to our elected leaders. And finally, the last slide that I want to show you, when I spoke earlier about the teen program that we've created, this is about half of the group that started this year, class of 2024. In the presence of Noah Tishby, who zoomed in from Los Angeles to speak to this group. These students are meeting once a month for 2 years. We're taking them to Israel. We're bringing them to Washington to lobby for the U.S.-Israel relationship. We expect from them that they are going to go out to, once they land on campus, that they're going to be leading the pro-Israel community, and they're going to be arriving on campus with a much better understanding of this complicated geopolitical issue. They're coming with a strong opinion, and they're hopefully going to be prepared to advocate on behalf of Israel and the Jewish community. So with that, I'm going to yield the floor back to Jordana, who's going to start the Q&A portion of this webinar, and then I know she's going to open up the Q&A for questions from the audience.
Yes, thank you, Linda, and thanks to all of you for sharing some of the key aspects of your work. Now, obviously, there is a lot to unpack here, so I'm going to start off with some follow-up questions, and then we'll open it up to the audience. So members of the audience, please put your questions into the Q&A feature, and we'll try to get to as many as we can. Linda, I'll start with you. You've talked about your teen program to prepare students for college campuses, and full disclosure, my son is one of Linda's students, and he will be traveling with Linda to Israel in February. The Right On for Israel program, or Teen Israel Leadership Council, which is its new name, it reaches less than or fewer than 40 students each year. So what would you say to the vast numbers of high school students who are not in your program, or to their parents for that matter, about how to get ready to confront the inevitable anti-Israel activity when they do get to college?
Yeah, thanks, Jordana. That's it's a good question, and arguably we do reach a small number of students. I like to say that these are students who I think are destined for leadership, And I'm not going to say that every student, wants to be a leader on campus, but I think it's incumbent upon us, knowing what the climate is on far too many campuses in this country, that our young people are aware and exposed to the dynamics that they will potentially confront. I think the best way that they can prepare themselves, short of going to Israel, and I know a lot of students do, and there are many other programs that give them the opportunity to travel to Israel and to experience this firsthand, but it's really to open a book. I mean, there are excellent books that we can recommend that students, if they care enough, if they want to have that knowledge, if they want to arrive with a certain confidence level that I dare say they don't have right now, that they really need to read. And that can be books, and that can be the news. But what I think is really important for students to have before they get to college is an opinion on where they stand on this conflict, whether it's left, right, or conflicted center. And in order to do that, they really need to understand this. And it takes cracking open a book or two in order to be able to do that. But last thing I'll say is that the good news is that there are supportive organizations on campus, like the one that Rebecca represents, Hillel, and other Jewish organizations that are there to support our students. And I think we all should be very grateful that those organizations exist.
Thank you very much. Rebecca, on that note, I'll take the next question to you. When eggs are thrown at a Jewish fraternity on Holocaust Memorial Day, as happened at Rutgers, New Brunswick, there's no ambiguity. That's clearly anti-Semitism, and usually administration officials are quick to condemn it. But what happens when Jewish students want a seat at the climate change or LGBTQ support group table and they're told to check their Zionism at the door? How much support out there are you getting from college presidents or other administrative figures when Jewish students are discriminated against simply for supporting Israel?
So, support from campus presidents and administration varies a lot from campus to campus, and it's something that, as a Hillel program, we're really working to build upon. I mentioned earlier that we're receiving increased efforts from the Rutgers Newark administration, and we've also built recently a significantly better relationship with the Montclair State administration. And recently, a few of our Rutgers Newark board members attended a Shabbat dinner at Rutgers New Brunswick, Hillel, and they had the opportunity to sit down with President Holloway for a conversation about what's going on their campus, because he doesn't spend a whole lot of time at Rutgers Newark. And they requested a meeting with him to help plan how the administration can be even more supportive. And he was super receptive to the idea, and they'll be meeting with him early next semester. I think it's important to note that we have a really close relationship with Hillel International in this sense. Our university administrators and presidents, they usually want to be supportive, I think, of a positive climate for Jewish students. But the challenge is that they lack the knowledge and or understanding of the sources and history of anti-Semitism and how it affects Jewish students on campus. They just have no idea. So because of this, we're hoping to participate in Hillel International's Campus Climate Initiative, which is a program designed to educate and engage campus administrators in creating a better climate for our students. So essentially, we want to help university administrators connect the dots of hatred, hatred of Israel, anti-Zionism, and anti-Semitism.
Thanks. I'm going to turn it over to Elise now, because so much of what we're seeing locally is, as you pointed out, happening at high schools with making swastikas in public spaces. And you've gone into these schools and you've taken survivors to talk about the meaning of this hateful symbol. Can you talk a little bit about how students respond, especially when a survivor or a survivor's relative goes with you? And as a follow-up, if you could also address why students are doing this now. Is it just immature teenage behavior, or is there something more going on?
All really good questions and good things to talk about. To start with, I will want to mention, though, it's really surprisingly, yes, it's high schools, but we're working as young as elementary and middle schools. We're seeing incidents taking place. So, which is just is sad to see, but that is also why I want to stress the importance of how much the education matters, because these are young kids. And I'll start kind of backwards with your last question, Jordana, if that's okay, that why are students doing this? Well, there's a lot of reasons. One, yes, kids are immature, they push boundaries just like in anything else. But these are kids right now that are in a vast social media age, and they see things that we, as their parents, as their teachers, as their clergy, we don't know that they're seeing. So with all of the talk on social media, from influencers, famous people, rappers, sports players, and saying these things, kids are hearing these things. Most of the time, they have no education. They don't really know what it is and what they're saying. And that's why our belief and what we are all focused on, all of us, all four of us here, as well as our other colleagues that work on this at Federation with us, we are really focused on the point that with our young people, our elementary school students, middle school students, high school students, we don't want to punish, we want to educate through that. Now, we understand that there are times when students really do something wrong, they have to be held accountable. But we want to work with the schools and the districts to ensure that it's in an appropriate manner so that they're learning from what they did, not that they are just saying, you did something wrong and we're taking something away from you. It's not that kind of a right and wrong. So I wanted to share yesterday, I was in a school in Chester that has had us many, many times, and you asked about the reaction of students. So we focus a great deal when we're sharing stories on the person, on the individual. We talk about their life, what their life was like, what their family's life was like, what they did. And so one thing that really struck these students yesterday and totally hit a chord with them was when the survivor shared about having to leave behind his dog when they left. And to most of these students, many of whom, I think I asked them and almost the entire room held up their hands. I said, who has a pet here? Most of them did. And so they very much related to that. This was not somebody, 75, 80 years ago in the past. This was somebody they were seeing that had a life like theirs and did something like they did, walked their dog. Something very that most people here, we take that for granted and they don't realize that that was something that was taken away. So we work really hard with that education to draw that out. We don't want to just go in and say, everything went wrong, this was what happened, and 6 million Jews were murdered and we had to hide for our lives. We don't want that to be this story, because we want the students to relate. We want to share that as the resulting of what all these things that didn't happen, but we want them to see the individual. And so I think the response is very strong in schools because it is so relatable, hearing from a survivor or a child or a grandchild of a survivor.
Thank you for that. Bob, so much of the hate that we're encountering these days is happening online. Could you talk a little bit about how that's monitored in the state of New Jersey, and are we properly coordinated with law enforcement and Homeland Security when there is an identified threat?
Yes, thank you. So we monitor, the monitoring of hate online occurs at several levels, starting with the actual platform policing its own content to some extent, private individuals reporting it to the platforms, to law enforcement, or to ourselves or an organization such as the ADL. Even here at GMW, our own communal security partners throughout New Jersey monitor it as well as our partnerships that we have established between ourselves and the New York Community Security Initiative, as well as the Secure Community Network, all of which are seeking out online hate. We report it and we share the information between each other, and we work that way best to respond. When it's found, one of the things that's important, and it's just actually unfortunately occurred in our community this past Sunday, where someone posted an anti-Semitic image, not an image that was anti-Semitic in and of itself, but talked about firebombing with a Molotov cocktail, a synagogue, and showed a picture of a Molotov cocktail. And the importance is to remember that if you do notice something like that, to take a screenshot of it, because these posts do have a way of disappearing. And I think it's an important thing for law enforcement follow-up, and just for us to ensure that we have a record of what actually was said and how it was perpetrated.
Okay.
I just
Sorry,
wanted
go
to,
ahead.
yeah, just, additionally, we do collaborate a lot with, our law enforcement partners, be it local, county, or state and Homeland Security. I currently sit on the executive board of the Interfaith Advisory Council of the Department of Homeland Security in the state of New Jersey, with direct access to the Director of Homeland Security. And we collaborate with the FBI. We're all aware of the early November tweet that came out from the FBI about the threat against synagogue in New Jersey. And we had a meeting actually most recently with the FBI. And, that partnership going forward is going to be a lot more enhanced than the way that most recent incident was handled.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
I'm going to incorporate some audience questions as well, so please feel free to keep putting them in the chat. Rebecca, if you could talk about, it's a two-parter, so part mine and part the audience. If you could talk a little bit more about what's happening currently at Rutgers Newark Law School. Someone in the chat asked, and as a follow-up, if you could please talk about how the Jewish community, including the people who are on this webinar, can support your work on our local campuses.
Sure. So I should clarify a little bit. It's not direct from the law school where it's happening. It's specifically coming from the Center for Security, Race, and Rights. They've hosted, and so they're affiliated with the law school, and it's a little hard to explain. There's one of the professor that runs it is a part of the law school. So it's not directly the school itself putting out these events, but this other program. And so they've hosted several different anti-Israel and anti-Zionist speakers. They're basically putting up a very one-sided narrative, and that narrative is being advertised to all students, including undergrads, not just the law school. And last semester, we met with law school deans, and they basically said that their hands are tied. There's not much that they can do because it's not the law school directly. President Holloway is aware of it, and it's something that we're going to address again when we meet with him next semester in, I think, January. But so I hope that answers the first question. The second question was specifically about how people can be helpful. Is that accurate? Great. So the biggest help to us as a Hillel is really connections. We're a small staff with 6 different campuses, and there's only so much that we can do in terms of reaching out to the people who make things happen on campus. So if anyone has connections to people within the universities that we work with, that's always helpful to introduce us to people, to help us get our name out there and the work that we're doing. The other piece of that is that we are always trying to find the Jewish students on campus, right? These schools don't have large Jewish populations. Most of the students who are coming to these campuses are not searching for an active Jewish community. If they were looking for that, they probably would have gone to a different school with plenty of kosher food options and services every Friday night and Saturday morning. But we're not those campuses. So we are doing our best to locate students on campus that could benefit from a Jewish community, and could benefit from Jewish support. So if anyone knows students who are attending any of our universities, we would love to be put in touch with them.
Great, thank you. Elise, could you please summarize, to a certain extent, obviously with time constraints, the state curriculum guidelines for Holocaust education, and at what grade should students be taught about the Holocaust?
Absolutely. So interestingly enough, the state guidelines mandate that Holocaust education should be taught from elementary school in an obviously appropriate manner. Generally, we see a 4th and 5th grade curriculum initiative, usually in 8th grade, sometimes 7th, but usually another one in 8th grade curriculum, and then 11th grade. Those are not exacts, but that is generally what our schools are tending to do. The mandate says that we should use Holocaust education to teach inclusivity, to teach about hatred, to teach about getting along, and all of those things. So you might see as early as kindergarten a teaching of the Holocaust by teaching kindness. You might see in 3rd grade or 4th grade a story of friendship, like we would see in Reading Number the Stars, which is a story where a non-Jewish girl helps her Jewish friend to secure safety outside of Denmark and Sweden. So you might see stories like that in an age-appropriate way, according to what the mandate dictates. I will say that the mandate and no mandates in the state of New Jersey dictate curriculum. That is not what's done in our state. We only mandate what should be taught. However, the State Department and the Commission has set up a vast wealth of knowledge on curriculum and how to teach, and that is all on the Commission's website. You can find it there. Teachers can find it there. They can access it, and it has lesson plans. It has resources. It has tremendous amounts of work that can be done. And finally, I will say that just today at the Commission meeting, we launched a project that a student from Greater Metro West did for her bat mitzvah. She created Holocaust education teaching trunks that I supervised her to make sure that everything in there was sound and that it was good curriculum. I supervised. We worked together for months. She was incredible, 12 to 13 years old, bat mitzvah age, and she provided 2 trunks to use throughout the state that will be shared broadly, and schools can rent them out and enhance their curriculum with them.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Linda, I think this is mainly directed to you, but please, anyone else, feel free to chime in and answer. Can you talk a little bit about how Federation works with other organizations that are involved with anti-Semitism and security within the context of the Jewish community, such as ADL or CSI? Is there coordination across these organizations?
There is, absolutely. We work in fairly close coordination, I would say lately with the ADL. Of course, they're a national organization and they're dealing with these issues on a national, international level, but they also they have their regional representatives and 2 colleagues who are responsible for combating anti-Semitism, the work that's being done in New Jersey. So as I believe I said earlier, in situations particularly where a school, and we've seen it recently in Montclair, a young student in middle school, a Jewish student, complained that a fellow student actually gave her a Nazi salute. That was then dealt with by the school. It was a HIB violation, and they needed to go through the proper procedures to confirm that had actually happened. But once that had been confirmed, then we reach out to the ADL. Again, Elise will work with a school to bring in a survivor, and we're all we meet regularly, we speak regularly, and we're all we all have the same goal, which is to eliminate this. So to the extent that we can, we work quite collaboratively.
Thank you. This one is for everyone. How do we get the message out that anti-Semitic remarks can't be equated with anything else, especially with Kanye West? Other music artists have been known to be demeaning to women. There are rapists, child molesters, etc. Peloton took down Kanye West music, but members of the Peloton Facebook community, many of whom made anti-Semitic comments themselves, replied with, if you don't like what he says, then just don't listen to his music. Of course, many others replied, that's not what this is about. And so the overall feeling, and I'll add that comes up a lot with anti-Semitism, was it's just not that big a deal. So how do we go about changing that mindset?
I can jump in. I think that it starts with education, and I think that that's what we're doing here, right? Like these webinars are really important, but I think we, as a Jewish community, we need to do a better job of educating not just the Jewish community about what's going on. It needs to open up to more people. We try to do that on campus. Our events are all open to the larger community, not just Jewish students, and we try to advertise and co-sponsor, especially with other organizations. And the more you educate people who have no idea, because those are always the people who are chiming in on Facebook and making those remarks, the more you educate them, the better off we're going to be down the line. It's going to take time. It doesn't happen overnight, but it starts with education.
Yeah, I would echo exactly what Rebecca has said. And I'll tell you, I'm also dealing with students who are asking, why can't we separate the art from the artist? Students who want to continue listening to Kanye, don't like the anti-Semitism, but really like his music. And I think, they were saying that before he actually appeared with a mask on on Alex Jones' show. I think that probably crossed a line, but I agree with Rebecca. I think it's all about education. And I'll also say that, working with the interfaith community, I'm often asked, do they get us? Like, do they understand what it is that we're going through? And if so, why are they not, standing up with us more? Like, why aren't they issuing statements when, a lot of people feel that that's exactly what we do, when this happens in other communities, we do. And sometimes it is frustrating to have to say, we think it's important for you to say something, but we, as I said earlier, silence is no longer an option, and we are investing in these relationships, and we are making it clear that we need to stand up for each other in this polarized environment, very charged, where hate is on the rise. It's not just on the rise. I mean, it's at record levels, and it's incumbent upon all of us to be standing up for the other. I remember the words of Rabbi Charlie. We had him speak at a conference of this Community Leaders Against Hate and Anti-Semitism back in March, and here's a man who went through the unthinkable, but still does not want to close his doors, and was very active prior to this terrible event in Colleyville in January, very active in reaching out to his colleagues in the interfaith community. And he has said, the more people know us, the less likely it is that they're going to hate us. And this is really, important. This is the work that we need to be engaged in now, is reaching out and doubling down on those activities. And I think each of us in our own way are doing just that.
Well, you preemptively answered my last question. So I'll just pose it to the three remaining panelists before I do my outro. I would say, looking at the current situation through the prism of your work, what gives you hope?
I'll jump in first. And so I'll say, and thank you for asking that, is that we, again, like yesterday, seeing in schools, we are extremely busy, and the schools are reaching out. Areas are calling us. They want to do programming. Teachers want to get educated. We had 10 teachers this summer go on trainings in Europe when they still did it at the risk, and 2 of them did get COVID and were isolated in their hotel rooms, having to Zoom into the conference, but they wanted to go so badly and learn that we had to close out. We had 25 apply. We could only take 10. So we are seeing that there is such an interest in this. We are seeing that schools need help in doing this. We have to shift the model. For students today, learning about anti-Semitism, learning about the Holocaust is today's world to them, even though the Holocaust happened 80 years ago. So we need to shift that focus and understand how we wrap that education together. And what gives me hope is that people want that education.
I'm currently I'm in Dallas at the Hillel International Global Assembly with 1,000 of my colleagues and stakeholders who are here really focusing on anti-Semitism on campus and what does that look like. It's been the main topic of conversation this week. And I think seeing how much effort the movement is putting into this and making sure our students feel safe on campus it gives me so much hope that like we can get this job done and that we can make sure that we're moving forward. So it's been really inspiring.
You know, I'm encouraged when this morning at 7:45 in the morning, we're in a school, an early childhood center in Bloomfield, and the Bloomfield Police Department sent 4 police officers there to help train and drill this early childhood center. And the passion that the officers had for doing their job, and the concern for them as a member of the community was just, it encourages me. And that's that type of thing. And when we had an incident in Springfield, the police department's desire to follow up and enforce the laws to the fullest extent, it just encouraged me every day.
So I'm actually going to jump in and take the prerogative of having the last word, at least of the panelists. What gives me tremendous hope and really I find so elevating is seeing the richness of Jewish life on college campus. I mean, Rebecca talks about the hundreds of colleagues of hers in Dallas today, and I'm thinking about the college campuses that they're going back to, the Shabbat dinners, the holiday celebrations, you know, the engagement or re-engagement of our young people in Jewish life. Many of these students haven't really engaged Jewishly since their bar and bat mitzvahs, and to re-engage with this and to, you know, step into their future after experiencing this on campus, I think is very inspiring and gives me tremendous hope. And knowing also about, you know, our elected leaders and the support of law enforcement across civil society. You know, we hear about the bad stuff, but I think we're all here to say that there is tremendous good going on. And I think that should give us all tremendous hope.
Thank you. There is tremendous good on this panel alone. I want to thank our 4 panelists, Bob, Linda, Elise, and Rebecca. Thank you, all of you, for being with us tonight. But most of all, thank you for your important work in keeping our community safe and for advocating on behalf of all of us. And as great as you all are, we know that you don't do this work alone, because each professional works closely with lay volunteers. It's a true partnership with some of the most dedicated and engaged Jewish leaders in our community. And one of those people is Zev Shirl, who's the chairman of the JCRC, who will close tonight's program. And so now I turn to Zev for the last word.
Thank you, Jordana, and thank you to our dedicated and wonderful panelists. And thank you all for joining us tonight. As you can see, our Greater Metro West Federation professional team is playing a critical role confronting anti-Semitism here in our community. As many Jewish organizations confront anti-Semitism on a national level, our federation works locally on numerous fronts, building alliances, educating our young people, carrying out security training, and ensuring that we remain a safe, secure, and vibrant Jewish community. And we thank you, because none of this is possible without your financial support. So thank you for your generous support of our UJA annual campaign. As passionate community members yourselves, please join us and lean into our work and contact us to volunteer and get involved. And if you or anyone you know in our community see or experience anti-Semitism, please make sure you report it to the police, and also contact Bob Wilson or file an incident report on our Federation website. In the days ahead, we'll be sending you an email with resources to help deepen your understanding of anti-Semitism and how to combat it, as well as follow-up events to tonight's program. May the light of Hanukkah help dispel the darkness that we are seeing. Happy Hanukkah to all of you. Thank you again, and good night.